Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Oddities video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll start this whole new series based on some of your newer suggestions. This one has been suggested I think since the very beginning, so I thought I would go ahead and finally share it here. It has to do with such a mysterious incident that happened in the late 80s with regards to something, whatever it was, being broadcast live throughout two separate instances on TV, almost as if the TV shows themselves were abducted by this illegal stream slash broadcast. So lots of good info to share to this very day. There is no one that has come forward claiming credit, and no one has been able to decipher who did this illegal intrusion regarding the broadcast television. So to this day, that's why it remains such a huge and fascinating mystery. And I'm talking about this, the incident known as the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion or broadcast signal intrusion, which you're looking at a picture of here. For starters, I've included the links below, two of them, because they were two separate times that this Max Headroom broadcast intrusion occurred. So when you have a chance, first check out the links below. I can't put them on here because, as with anything YouTube related, if I put videos actually within my video, then that risks a lot of times like copyright infringement. Who knows? So I don't risk that stuff anymore. But if you click on the links first, take a look at the videos, and then come back here, and then we can talk about it. So, but let's go ahead and I'll just pause for a few seconds to allow you to pause this video. Alright, now that you're back after watching these two instances, isn't that some of the most bizarre stuff you have ever seen? Imagine something like this, where you're just watching a regular TV show, and then all of a sudden, this pops up. In a weird way, it's very unsettling because it just seems so crazy, like almost as if something is happening, like there's anarchy, in other words, happening on a wide basis. You don't expect this type of stuff to kind of unsettle you at first, but afterward it does. So here's what occurred with regards to this incident. You have to go back to November 22nd, 1987 to be specific, somewhere there in Chicago. That's when there was this first incident that occurred somewhere around, I think it was late at night, and then the other incident happening even later at night as well. So the first instance occurred during the 9 o'clock news. It was during a broadcast called the 9 o'clock news with some, I guess, presenter, somebody that was an anchor there, giving his, I guess, presentation, whatever it was he was talking about at that moment. It was a guy by the name of Dan Roan, and he was on a channel that was considered at that time Channel 9. So the 9 o'clock news on Channel 9 was how is it known. So there he was talking about some victory, something associated with the Detroit Lions, when all of a sudden it just went blank. You have to imagine that instance, like it just went completely blank. So I could totally imagine people throughout the entire Chicago area, and I'll talk about more why it only affected Chicago and not anywhere else here in a minute, but I could imagine everyone there watching the news all of a sudden wonder what's going on. This was for 15 seconds, a completely blank screen. And then the first incident popped up. That's where all of a sudden the static started building. There was some twitching, some flickering, and then when the picture became clear, it wasn't the broadcast of the news with Dan Roan. No, in this case, it was this guy. Somebody was dressed up with the grinning face of Max Headroom. If you ever heard of Max Headroom, I just knew a little bit of information of him regarding like this incident in particular. But he was like a slogan, a mascot, a character of some sort that eventually became a pitchman for New Coke. Someone correct me on this too, but wasn't he also in some other part of a show as well? And then of course probably the most the most famous instance that I know him from, the character of Max Headroom, was within the Back to the Future film. There was a very prominent scene where he comes out there as well. He's creepy looking though, this guy Max Headroom, whatever this mascot or character is. I mean, there's just something about that creepy looking smile. It just looks like what's the term I'm looking for, like uncanny valley. It's the idea where somebody is made to look more human. Something is made to look more human, but the more human they look, the more unsettling they look. So in this case, I have no idea how this guy became the concept of Max Headroom became such a popular mascot during that time period in 1987, but he was. And so at that time, he was, in particular, the pitchman for the now infamous New Coke. So the screen suddenly came on. There he was, just grinning with his eternal grin. Whoever was in that mask just started just basically swaying a little bit towards the side, and then most prominently there was something in terms of like a picture, a sheet of some sort in the background, looked like a metal gate, kind of like the gate that you would find at a storage box. Those places that have all those storage boxes that you just lift the metal lid upwards and then you get into your room. That's what it seemed like to me. Obviously, that was not the true background. It was just a picture of the background because of it being able to sway up and down, back and forth. So clearly, in this case, this was the first instance. It only lasted though for about maybe 30 seconds or so, very, very short time period altogether, including the blank screen. So there he was, whoever this person was that took over the airwaves with his grinning Max Headroom face, just pretty much making a mockery of this instance where they took over the airwaves. And when that happened and it just suddenly cut, it went back straight to the news show, and there was the anchor Dan Roan saying now almost an infamous line, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." And then that was it. That was everything associated with that first instance. But if you thought that that was the end of it, then you were clearly wrong that night, because later on, around 11:15, and I think this was on a sister channel of some sort, channel 11, they were actually broadcasting a Doctor Who episode. The Doctor Who episode was Horror of Fanrock, or some serial called Horror of Fanrock. And what makes this more prominent is A, this incident was longer than the first one, and then B, because it was involving an episode of Doctor Who, a lot of the viewers were recording the episode at that time. So now there was more concrete proof to showcase of this incident later on, as opposed to the first one. I mean, who records news programs? But in this case, because it was an episode of Doctor Who, now so many people would have recorded it, and it would stay in total for the rest of the time. Like, it would be something that you could have easy access to for the rest of the time. Maybe that's why in this case, the incident was much longer, because whoever played this prank knew that so many people were going to be recording it, and that's why they made such a much higher effort in this case. So, sure enough, the episode was playing. And then right in the middle of one of the scenes, that's when he came back on, the so-called Max Headroom. Same person, same suit, same mask, same quote-unquote background. This time, though, things took a very bizarre turn. If you've seen that second video by now, you'll know what I mean. Like, there was some weird, distorted words. It's clear that this guy was talking through a huge filter. Whatever it was really making his voice creepy. I mean, almost, if you were lower the pitch, almost like demonic or something. It's almost like the stuff you would almost hear in like horror movies. And he was pronouncing words. People have deciphered a lot of those words, but for the most part, some of them were still left unclear. He was throwing in a bunch of catchphrases, including, it looks like, I guess, tirades towards pop culture in general, because there were catchphrases involving New Coke's slogan, "Catch the Wave." There was a Michael Jackson glove, again another pop symbol as well. There was something in terms of, people reported a quote from some announcer, "Your love is fading." There was a theme song that this guy even sung within all that tirade from a TV series called Clutch Cargo. He even crushed the New Coke can itself, threw it at the screen. He had, I think, a large another glove with a middle finger sticking up. I thought it looked like a Mickey Mouse glove, but I wasn't able to see too much of it clearly. But a lot of stuff was happening within this particular tirade. And then taking an even bizarre turn, and even more one, if you could believe it, the screen immediately shifted to another scene. Same spot, but in this case it was a different shot, a different angle. And in this case, this guy, this quote unquote Max Headroom, was bent over with his pants pulled down, and then there was a second person there, also unseen but clearly a female, and she was spanking him as she wore some kind of maid's, like a sexy maid's outfit. So clearly very, very bizarre when it came to that point. That also was very indicative of the fact that whatever was being broadcast was not live, because in this case, there, when he was going through his weird filtered voice diatribe, and then immediately, like split second later, it shifted to him bending over. That's not live. In this case, it made it seem like it was broadcast from someplace else, like this was a recorded item being broadcast live towards something else. So very interesting stuff with regards to that notion. And then that was it. Once the spanking was done, then the guy infamously said, whoever this Max Headroom was, saying they're coming to get me, almost screaming it out. And then it cut to black, and then immediately returned back to the Doctor Who episode. This incident lasted a good 90 seconds, far longer than the other one. If you're wondering why, it's because at that time, with it being 11 o'clock at night, there was a lot of panic, because there weren't any engineers that could stop this immediately at that station. In that case, all they could do was try to do something remotely, not directly at the tower, but instead somewhere else in the country remotely, to try to stop it. But before they could even do that, then whoever was broadcasting this just decided to cut it in time. Probably they did so because I don't know if this stuff can be traced that quickly, but they didn't want to make sure that they would give any authorities enough time to try to see where this was. But that's it. That's essentially the two instances, they're probably the two most famous illegal pirating instances of live TV there in Chicago. As I mentioned earlier, if you're wondering why it only happened in Chicago, it's because of this. At that time in 1987, I don't know if it's still happening now, but at that point, basically the concept of TV being broadcast is relatively simple. You just had something in top of a tower broadcasting a huge power at, like a microwave, whatever it's called, that transmits TV signals across the city. And the whole purpose is your transmission is the most powerful one, so that way all the TV channels pick it up. It takes a lot of power to do so. This is not cheap equipment. This is absolutely something that mega corporations would have the money for, and that's also to ensure that no one else can steal or take over that channel. Because when you think about it this way, have you ever noticed sometimes whenever you're on a radio station and then suddenly the radio for whatever reason cuts out, like something is happening with that station's local area and the power is cut off, all of a sudden you that same channel starts picking up a very faint broadcast from somewhere else. That's because now with that radio station's broadcast that was normally transmitting throughout the entire city no longer there, that station, that particular station number, I'll just make a number up, like 93.8, is now picking up whatever else it can that happens to be transmitting on that same frequency. It's very simple. I'm explaining it very simple, but I'm sure it's a lot more complex than that. But still, that's the same concept here with regards to the Chicago area. That station, whatever it was there, that WGN, they in turn were broadcasting a very, very powerful signal. It ensured that that was their signal. That when people went to channel 9 or channel 11, then that's the station that they picked up primarily. But whoever did this, because there clearly was an investigation thereafter, for the FCC investigated, the FBI investigated. This is a huge illegal activity when you do something like this, because because of the panic that this can cause. Like, imagine if it was really simple, then people would be taking over airwaves constantly, both either, let's say, on TV or on the radio, and then making false claims, making something that would create panic. That's why there's such a huge fine. People can spend years in jail for doing this. It's considered very, very serious. So there was clearly an investigation that started, and throughout the entire investigation, signals were trying to be found. There was locations that were trying to be in this case, thought of as to where this thing broadcasted. Wherever it was, though, it was surmised that whoever had this capability had some money, because they must have had something that could generate a signal more powerful than the antenna there at the WGN tower, which I believe was in the Sears Tower. And so because of it, they would have to have spent a huge amount of money in order to broadcast just that small amount of signals, because of the power involved. You can't just do it with any small equipment. You have to do it with a larger equipment. That's the best thing that they could surmise related to this instance. It was someone with money, and then someone that was close by to the Sears Tower, so it's close enough to be able to override that particular frequency and then showcase their own for those few moments. But again, nothing else in terms of who did this, why they did this, who can be identified even after all these years. To this very day, there's nothing in terms of any leads that people have done. So not that anybody is going to try to claim credit, because I think even after all these years, you can still be found guilty. I don't think this has like a what do they call it, where it's after a certain number of years, you can no longer be accused of it. I forget what the term is called, but I don't think that they have this in this instance because of the implications involved. I remember, I'll give another example. One of the local radio stations here in Austin a couple of years back, or was it here? Yes, I think it was here. They accidentally broadcast those famous beeps, the ones that you hear that come on TV, the ones that come over the radio where they say this is not an emergency, this is just a test involving the emergency broadcast system. Well, they accidentally broadcast it, and it in turn triggers other stations to broadcast it, but they were fined very heavily. I think it was $1 million that the station was fined because of it, because you cannot have that type of stuff taken over. So that's why in this case the FCC investigated, the FBI investigated this Max Headroom incident, but still nothing was found, and no one to this day has claimed anything towards it because of the serious implications involved. But that's it. That's really all the info tied to this. Who was this person, this Max Headroom, within this instance? Was it a prankster? Was it someone from another country that was testing, in this case, broadcast channels, trying to see what they could take over? Was it just someone that was a disgruntled employee? Who knows? There's so many theories out there regarding this incident that to this day, anyone's guess is as good as everyone else's. So, but still, if anyone has any info that I might have missed that's really good to share, please post those comments below. Anybody that happened to know someone that was there during the time period of these instances there in Chicago, that'd be really great to hear if you actually saw this live, because imagine, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this was pretty unsettling to see something like this happen suddenly live. It just seems like it's anarchy, like it's just somebody taking over and then making a mockery of things. So pretty interesting stuff still nonetheless. So alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care.